Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football, and welcome back to another edition of Football Theory. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Pleased to be joined by the latest and newest member of the On Texas Football family. He needs no introduction, my friend and coworker Jeff Howe. We got a lot to get into on the show. Jeff's got a really good take that I'm interested to hear, actually, about Texas's offense next season and one of the exotic elements we may see come back into the offense. Also, I'll get into coverages. We got a new DB coach on the 40 acres. Mark Orfe, and I think he actually may influence, or at least he may be one of the main reasons that this defense coverage-wise starts to shift in a different direction. And we'll talk about that too coming up on Football Theory. But first, let's thank our fabulous sponsor, Laura Baker. Laura Baker, sponsor of Football Theory. We appreciate her. She's an accomplished Austin realtor. Laura and the Andy Allen team at Keller Williams can handle all of your real estate needs in the Austin area. Laura is not only a diehard Longhorn fan, but a longtime Austin real estate expert. So please give her a shout today. 512-784-0505. That's 512-784-0505. Thank you very much to Laura Baker and her team for sponsoring our team and being the sponsor here of Football Theory. All right, Jeff. We got a new DB coach, Mark Orfe. So I've been doing some deep dive, and we haven't talked enough about him, I feel like, because it's a short choice thing happened and another coaching vacancy. So it's been a lot of news in between that hire, but got me to doing some rabbit holing about this defense. And I've been on this this theory and having this take for a while that it's not really not my take. I mean, it's something that Sark said 3 years ago, and I'm just holding him to it because I think Sark actually wants to pivot here coverage-wise on the defense side of the ball, and they want to play more man coverage. Mm-hmm. And my theory, at least right now, it's starting to at least gain a little bit of credibility, because I think that may have been one of the reasons that they hired Mark Orfe. And I did the research on Rutgers, and that 2023 season is what everybody talks about. They were a top 10 ranked pass defense that year. Really, I mean, they had some really good players, all conference caliber players that year in that secondary. And I went back and watched the film. I was like, all right, let me go watch these guys. You can learn a lot about a secondary coach by just watching his secondary. Man, I was honestly shocked to see them play so much press man coverage, a ton of press man coverage, and not just situationally, not just matchup based. I'm talking about no matter who they play. That was it. That was one of their core principles. And I went back. So all right, let me do the research. And so in 2023, Rutgers, they had a top 10. They were top 10 in the Power 5 in man coverage rate. I had them 8th in the Power 5 in man coverage rate. In terms of cover 0 and cover 1, they were close to 44%. Then I looked at Max Melton. He was one of the stars out of that secondary, got drafted into the NFL, I believe, by the Cardinals, right, in the second round.
Second round, yep.
Yeah, really good player. Out of the draft-eligible corners that year, I went back and looked at the draft research. 45% man coverage rate for him, second highest among draft eligible corners coming out that year. All right. So that actually did track with the research that I did. And in 2024, they were in the 80th plus percentile in all of college football. I had them top 25 in man coverage rate in 2024. And like I said, it is a lot of press man coverage. So my theory, I believe now holds a little bit of water. That's where they want to go. That's the next step. Last season, I mean, you're talking about a team that played man coverage at the 113th lowest rate in college football. Jeff, press coverage, 117th in college football. Still maybe the best secondary in the country, and yet they did not utilize what Nick Saban calls the best coverage in football. The best coverage in ball, I believe is what he said. Best coverage in ball is cover 1. They didn't utilize them. They didn't utilize them much at all.
Yeah, it's what man. When I think about coverages, Rod, and again, you've forgotten more about coverages than I know. It's not my area of expertise, but I think about kind of the three. I'll call them godfathers of elite college football coverage as we know it today: Nick Saban, Gary Patterson, and Pat Narduzzi. They're all kind of cousins of each other. It's a lot of pattern match quarters, some form of quarters, because what does quarters eventually devolve into? It devolves into man coverage. Now, two things go into playing really good quarters coverage. One, you got to be able to teach it really well and execute it well. And two, as those three guys have had. If you've got the horses to run cover 4, it's the most Urban Meyer's called it kind of the best of both worlds. It's the most effective coverage in football because it devolves into man coverage, but it's still zone principles, and it's kind of the best of both worlds if you can pull it off. But other coordinators, Rod, and what I like about those three guys, you know what you're going to get when you face those defenses, right? You face a Pat Narduzzi, a Gary Patterson, a Nick Saban defense. You know what you're going to get. That's why I think it was so easy for Sark to scheme against Alabama, because Nick Saban's not going to change. He's going to play cover 4. He's going to run his pattern match quarters. That's what you're going to get. Just like when it came to Tom Herman scheming against LSU back in 2019, it was easier to scheme against Dave Aranda at LSU. What do you know what you're going to get? They're going to play man coverage 85, 90% of the time. Yeah. So it's all about a preference. So I think now you mix PK, who's been more of a zone guy during his career, but we saw Johnny Nansen not only introduce playing more, we've talked about this on Football Theory, introduce a more middle field closed with the Sage playing with a post safety rather than middle field open with a 2 high, also introducing more man coverage. Now you're just doubling down on that, bringing in Mark Orfe. That seems to be his preference. That's with Greg Schiano and Rob Smith and that Rutgers staff. That seemed to be their preference. I know Rob Smith is the DC now, but everybody's from that same family. So that seems to be their preference for more man coverage. So I think, Rod, it's just doubling down on man coverage and maximizing the bodies you've got on the back end, because between Manny Muhammad and Kobe Black, Santana Wilson, most likely Cade Phillips, Grayson Littleton, you've got the guys now that can play the kind of aggressive man coverage that Sark has always envisioned playing. I just think it's doubling down on schematics now.
No, I totally agree with you. That's a great point. I'm glad you went there, because I think that's a great place to pivot. I remember PK saying after the 2021 season when Gary Patterson came in, because, my theory is that PK kind of miscalculated the conference. I think he still thought the Big 12 was kind of a passing conference, and then Gary Patterson had to come in and give him the cliff notes and basically how to play, coverage in the Big 12, or how to coordinate coverage in the Big 12. And here's a quote from PK. And he said this about the 2021 season. He said this was actually at the Alamo Bowl. He said 2 years ago, we were more vision than match. We weren't good at it. It was just too loose. Previously, a lot of those guys were already accustomed to a match quarters type of structure, match third structure. So we made the change. They actually picked it up pretty well. There was a lot of recall. They were playing with vision. For those who don't know, vision quarters is basically kind of your traditional zone coverage. Like you're actually passing off guys in coverage, passing them off to the next defender, and you're guarding an actual zone, an area of the field. And really, from what I remember, it was more zone match. You would match the deep vertical routes, and everything else they would try to pass underneath. Right? That's kind of how that's how PK's version of it worked. That's why when Gary Patterson came in, he was like, "Oh man, you got to play match. You got to match everything. You can't play vision, spot, zone coverage. That doesn't work anymore. You got to match every damn thing in the Big 12, man. The route concepts are too complicated. The offenses are too sophisticated." And that was the first shift for PK. They shifted to playing a lot of matches. As a matter of fact, in 2022, when Gary Patterson came on staff, Texas played the most quarters coverage, and it was match quarters in the Big 12. It was 54%. In GP's last year at TCU, they were a little under 54%, 53.4% in their quarters rate. So Gary Patterson came in, and immediately Texas coverages became like a Gary Patterson pretty much system. And it did improve, but they still weren't great at pattern matching. And in 2023, they still kind of kept that. They still were playing mostly two high safeties because they were playing a lot of quarters coverage. The other shift came, and you talked about it when Johnny Nansen came on the staff. Remember, Arizona had a single high middle field close rate of a single high safety of 80+%. It was the highest in college football. They had the highest cover 3 rate in college football at 58%. They were playing cover 3, but mostly match thirds. And Texas in 2024, Johnny Nansen influence, they for the first time played more single high safety, had a higher middle field close rate than they had two high safeties. So they shifted to more of the Nansen concept, and they also played more cover 3 than they did cover 4 for the first time in a couple of years. They were at cover 3 rate of over 35%. So they shifted. The Johnny Nansen influence works, more exotic concepts, the NASCAR package, or your big nickels, your dime, more exotic packages to confuse quarterbacks and create pressure. But ultimately, your coverages now were coordinated to be more aggressive. And I think that lines up with what Sark wants. Here's the Sark quote that I wanted to bring up. And I want to get your thoughts on it, because this is Sark from 2022. I kept the quote because he was asked why they made so many moves in the secondary. Think about how many moves they've made in the secondary since they got here. I'm talking about personnel moves. Because remember, after 21, that's when they moved Anthony Cook around, and then they moved Keaton Crawford around, and then this year they moved Janae Barron around, and then they brought in McCool. I mean, they
should have moved Deshaun Jameson around, but I don't.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. They've been tinkering with it for a while. Here's the quote from Sark. He said, "Why do we do that? So we can play more man-to-man coverage. I need more people on the field that can defend all these receivers in the Big 12. So we want to be more aggressive. We want to play more man-to-man. We want to have more of an attacking style up front." He went on to say, the tighter we are in coverage, I think that's going to help benefit the pass rush, and then vice versa. The better the pass rush, the better that helps a corner. We've got to get those things working really well together. His last thing he said was, we can play more aggressive, tighter coverage, and try to nullify the run with an extra hat in the box. They got the extra hat in the box. They're playing more single high. The next step is Sark's vision. They want to play more man-to-man. They're at a 16% man-to-man rate right now, which is, they've been lower than the national average every year. They're below the national average. Texas should not be below the national average in man coverage rate. That's the next step, in my opinion. I think next year they want to get to close to 20%. They were at 20% in 2023, and it failed them miserably. They didn't hold up well in man coverage. They got different athletes now. I think they'll go back to it a little bit.
Yeah. So real quick, I won't give a long diatribe here, but just a quick kind of we talked about how Dwayne Keenan was ahead of his time in the Big 12. He saw it coming. He saw the air raid revolution. It was there to stay. And you were part of that secondary, Rod, where he said, "Hey, I just want 4 guys that can cover, right? I don't need a free safety or a strong safety. I need 4 guys that can cover." And you guys led the nation in pass efficiency defense in 2021 with yourself, Ahmad Brooks, Nathan Vasher, and Quentin Jammer. 4 guys on the field that could cover. And that's, I don't know if people remember, but Dakari Pearson was a freshman All-American, ends up losing his job to Ahmad Brooks. Why? Because Ahmad Brooks was better in man coverage. So that was Dwayne Keenan being ahead of the curve. As we go forward and go forward about 20 years to at the height of when think about the Big 12 kind of in 2017, 18, 19, right? The Todd Orlando years. But that was when the Big 12, in terms of its offensive evolution, was probably at its best. When you think about what Lincoln Riley was doing at Oklahoma, what Cliff was doing at Tech, what Dana Holgorsen was doing at West Virginia, you have Mike Gundy and Mike Yurcich at Oklahoma State. Probably, even though, Art Briles kind of started it, really kind of threw it into overdrive, what Mike Leach had started with the air raid revolution, that probably was the peak of offensive schematics in the Big 12, was really when during the era where Tom Herman was the head coach at Texas. And the thing Todd Orlando learned the hard way is you can't just be one coverage or one front or play a static defense. You've got to constantly mix it up, because if a Cliff Kingsbury or a Dana Holgorsen or a Lincoln Riley, if their offense gets into rhythm and they pick up on what you're doing, especially think about the quarterbacks in the league at that time, Mason Rudolph, Mahomes, Baker, Kyler Murray, go down the list, they will eat you alive if they get a beat on what you do and you're not changing. So Gary Patterson understood that. PK really didn't, because even though a lot of those guys had left the league when PK first came in, I think Lincoln Riley was still there. A lot of those guys had left, but now we move into the hybrid spread era, which now you're even more dynamic, even more diverse. And if you stay in a too high static defense, which Texas did most of the time in 2021, teams had no problem just say, okay, we'll run the ball on you. Like, go back to that Arkansas game, right? You think Kendall Browse wide open throwing the football. No, Texas just stayed in a too high look. And at some point you realize, dude, Arkansas is going to run the ball for about 2 bills in this game. They ended up running for over 300 in that game. So that was where PK kind of first learned it. And then I think he probably knew it. And then Gary Patterson's hitting him over the head with a hammer. Like, dude, in this league, you can't just be one defense. It's not the Pac-12. Like, you got to mix it up and you got to be diverse. And we've seen PK evolve it every year in terms of being diverse, because now you look at the evolution in the SEC. Go look around the SEC. Everybody's running between Colin Klein at A&M and Lane Kiffin and Josh Heupel at Tennessee and even Vanderbilt, what they're doing with Diego Pavia, you're seeing more cousins of the air raid or the veer and shoot. And even like what Jeff Levy's doing at Mississippi State, they're going back to it at Oklahoma with now going to more of a traditional air raid. It's much more Big 12 than the Big 12 is now. The SEC is in terms of their offensive ideologies. So now PK is already ahead of the curve. Hey, we've been mixing it up and being diverse with our coverages. We've got the pass rush to go with it. So let's just double down on diversity in the secondary, which coverages. So I dig it. Sorry for the diatribe and the history.
That was money.
It's weird how we get these ebbs and flows, Rod, and where it seems like I don't think necessarily it's offense catching up with defense or vice versa. I just think kind of some stuff, what's old is new again, and that Big 12 influence has finally made its way into the SEC, and you're seeing the SEC. It's not a finesse style of football. I hate that. It's just, hey, it's a work smarter, not harder. Just take what the defense gives you. Man, if they're going to sit in a too high shell, we'll run the ball for 300 yards, and that's okay. We don't have to throw it all over the yard. If they're just going to play man coverage on us, if they're going to play cover one, we'll throw it for 400 yards. It don't matter.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff. That's Grasp Football Theory is a route, brother. Connecting the dots. Connecting the dots on the macro. All right, I'll give you the floor again because that was a great way to wrap up the coverage discussion. You wanted to get into something that honestly I want to talk about too, an exotic element of Sark's offense that I thought was going to become more of a staple in the offense. And this past season, we didn't see it at all.
The 6-0 line package is what my colleague Rod is talking about. If you go back to 2022, the 6-0 line package, that was when we first saw it. And it was Andre Karras. He lost his job as a starting offensive lineman and ends up finding that role as the 6th offensive lineman. And we know the passing game was hamstrung because Isaiah Nayer got hurt in the preseason, and then Xavier Worthy's trying to catch balls with one good hand. He's got a strong hand and a good hand. It wasn't working. But like a lot of hit or miss elements with that offense, the 6-0 line package got too predictable because it seemed like got to a point, Rod, where every time they bring in that 6-0 line package, like, all right, they're taking a shot. Now, why do you want to take shots with an extra O lineman on the field? This is why. And this is why I like the 6-0 line package. I think back to kind of anybody that's heard me talk football theory, kind of my gold standard for modern college football offenses is 2019 LSU. Like, yes, you had Joe Burrow and you had some insane wide receivers and a first-round running back, but what Joe Brady was doing, it maximized that talent, and we saw, man, it was hell on wheels for everybody in college football. By the time they got to that Peach Bowl in dismantled Oklahoma, it was infinitely better, an infinitely better offense than what we all saw in Austin in the second game of the season that year. So they were clicking and they knew what they were doing. What LSU did that was so great, and really it was to protect Joe Burrow from an offensive line that was good, not great. That 2019 LSU offensive line, it wasn't like the 2020 Bama offensive line or some of the better offensive lines we've seen. It was okay. What was the thing that Joe Brady did? Get the ball out fast. I think the national average, Rod, usually you're what, about 2.5 seconds usually getting the ball out. That's usually kind of right around where you want to be. Joe Burrow was probably around 2.3, 2.2 seconds getting the ball out. Just get it, take the snap, get it out quick because, hell, we're going to get a mismatch on the outside. You're going to double Jamar Chase? Great. Justin Jefferson's going to be one-on-one. You want to double Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase? Great. We'll throw it to Terrace Marshall, who's our number 3 receiver, or we'll throw it to Edwards-Helaire or Thaddeus Moss. One of these guys is going to be open. Basically, Joe Brady's answer to, hey, we need some form of max protection to help out and make sure our quarterback doesn't get murdered and screw up this plan we've got on offense. Just get the ball out fast. Get more guys involved in the route. That's what the 6-0 line package allows you to do. You know, you can keep that guy in, and it's not an eligible receiver as a tight end or a running back. I hate max protection. It's the devil because you've got able-bodied eligible receivers. They're hamstrung now because they're in as blockers. Just make somebody that otherwise wouldn't be a threat in the passing game. Just let him stay attached to the line of scrimmage and be a blocker. But we saw Texas get away from that last year. And I don't know, Rod, if it was they didn't have a guy they felt comfortable doing it, or they just really liked their 12 personnel with Gunnar Helm and Juan Davis, but we saw them get away with it. But going back to what I said initially, it got predictable because every time that 6-0 lineman comes in, they're going to take a shot. I think you're going to see it this year because of Arch Manning's proficiency throwing the deep ball. If you go back and look at the numbers, and CJ Vogel, our colleague CJ Vogel at On Texas Football did a great job. Quinn Ewers on passes 20 yards or more down the field, percentage of deep balls thrown. It was about 18% of his passes were deep shots. That number in 2023 went down to about 12%, and it was right around 12% in 2024. So basically, you cut that number down significantly from 2022. Remember, we just, it felt like Sark was just hunting the deep shots. He just needed it. You're chasing the dragon almost. Like it's that medicine that he wants that he can't find. But they got away from it, and I like Rod. They were taking what the defense was giving him. But now that you've got Arch, and you start looking at some of Arch's numbers last year with the deep ball, he was about 21.1% of his attempts were deep shots. Completed 42% of them, which is, it's weird how you think about completions on deep balls, because remember when Baylor was doing it back in the day, that spear and shoot with RG3 and their vertical shots, they were about, I think the national average is probably around 30%, and Baylor was completing about 38, almost 40, and all our minds were blown, right? Now you complete 40% of your deep shots, and it's like, okay, you're just falling in line with everybody else. So it's crazy how the game changes. But you look at Arch in terms of his PFF grades, the deep ball was the second highest in terms of depth, his second highest PFF grade. That the intermediate game, 10 to 19 yards, he was a grade of 84.7. He was 82.7 on deep shots, 8 of 19, 327 yards, 4 touchdowns. So 8 completions, 4 of them for touchdowns. He did throw 1 pick, but Rod
had a drop too. They had a drop on, remember?
The Jonte Cook drop against State. Yep.
Good touchdown, yeah.
So at the risk of repeating myself and rambling, I think because Arch is so good at the deep ball, if I'm Sark, I want more guys out in the route. I want to give Arch more options, but it's going to be a slow developing play. I'm not going to waste CJ Baxter or Jordan Washington or Nick Townsend or Trey Wisner or whoever as a blocker. I want to make sure I've got 6 blockers protecting Arch so he can get time to get these shots off.
The crazy thing is, because I like it. I was calling for it this year. I was blown away that we didn't see it at all. I thought we'd see it against Ohio State. It actually works really well versus 3 high defenses, which he actually proved in the Big 12. But I digress. This year with Jaden Blue would have been perfect for what you're talking about. Yeah. Another guy in the protect, Jaden Blue, just a receiver that he comes out of the backfield. It'd have been perfect for that, but he didn't see it. And Sark was asked about it. And I honestly, it might have been CJ that asked him about it because I kept, rambling about it. And Sark said we don't necessarily need it because it takes a receiver out of basically takes a receiver away as a threat. And Juan Davis is, basically an adequate blocker. And he was a plus blocker for them. Yeah. I'm with you. I think you should utilize it just to have more diversity in the offense. This was probably the least diverse offense that Sark has engineered here at Texas, just based on personnel groupings. I mean, you had no Wildcat, no 6-0 line, so no Big 11, no Big 12 package. You didn't have any 20 personnel. A lot of the variety in the offense actually went away. It was probably out of necessity, but I'm with you. I think Sark's natural tendency is to throw the deep ball. I think he wants it to be closer to 20%, but only if they're good at it. Early on, he was saying they were going to throw it anyway. Because it was such a big part of his ideology. They were going to throw the deep ball anyway. He curtailed that. He neutered the offense and made it more Quinn friendly because Quinn's not naturally a great deep ball thrower, but Arch is, and Shakes dig the long ball, and so does Arch. So I'm with you. I think it comes back. And to your point, I'll give you one more nugget before we get out of here. In my tracking the 6-0 line package, I did come up with this stat when we were talking about this. If you look at yards per attempt in 2022, you were right around 7 yards per attempt throwing the football in the 6-0 line package. In 2023, you went almost to 12 yards per attempt. Sark figured out that it's best for insulating pass protection. And not necessarily, because I think at first he was trying to run the football with it. And no. Insulation and pass protection, man, that's what it really helps you with. And to your point, it helps you be able to get downfield. He figured that out in 2023. We didn't really see it in 2024. So I agree with what you're saying 100%. And remember, they brought on, was it Paul Christ?
Yeah.
And I think Paul Christ also helped them. Because remember,
Yeah.
Paul Christ had a history with extra O-line packages and using them up in the Big Ten at Wisconsin. And I think he actually helped them come up with some more concepts with a 6 O-line package in the pass protection schemes and the blocking schemes. He's no longer with them, but I think, Sark got what he needed from him. Now, where we see it, I'm with you. We should.
But I think why Paul Christ helped, I think two things. I think one, why Paul Christ helped, you got to remember, I think Sark likes vibing with guys where he can kind of, connect the dots, if you will. Paul Christ and Sark, they both work for North Turner. So in a lot of ways, they speak the same language. And North Turner's offense, that's why Sark has more people, we talk about Norm Chow and some of the other influence he's got. Sark has more North Turner influence than you might think, because what's North Turner's offense has always been about? Run, and then we're going to play action, we're going to hit you deep. It ain't a lot of quick game or anything like that. You think about North Turner had Cam Newton, right? That's what Carolina did. It was, we're going to run, and when we throw it, we're going to throw it deep. So I think they spoke the same language, Paul Christ and Sark did. The other thing was, I'm not going to say Andre Carrick wasn't bought into the role of being the 6th lineman in 2022 because it was a fairly new package. But, man, Malik Ogbo really took to that role, and I thought was really good at it, to the point where, if you remember, Rod, during the Sugar Bowl, they're driving in the fourth quarter. Malik Ogbo catches a pass on one of those drives. And it's like,
only because he got,
this is your season. You're driving to go play for a national championship, and Malik Ogbo's catching balls. Like, that's how much this 6 line package has evolved. It was crazy, but so that's my thing, though. That's what it ultimately comes down to.
Good stuff there.
Can Spencer Shannon be a guy that you can keep in there, knowing he's not going to give you much of a threat in the pass game, but he's such a good blocker that will keep him in? Or can you sell Malik Ogbo on that role? Is there somebody else that can take on that role and be really good at it? If they can, then I think you should see more of it, because with Arch, it's going to be less quick game and more of your longer developing throws, your fade stops, your deep comebacks, your deep crossing patterns over the middle, obviously your vertical shots, your 7s and your 9s. All that stuff is going to be in with Arch, where it was in with Quinn, but that's the stuff where Arch is more comfortable, whereas Quinn was more comfortable timing, precision, quick game, get the ball out fast. Arch is going to hunt deep shots, and it seems like he can process it, and he's comfortable doing it. So I think that's where the offense is going.
All right, good stuff. Football Theory brought to you by accomplished Austin realtor Laura Baker. Laura and the Andy Allen team at Keller Williams can handle all of your real estate needs in the Austin area. Laura is not only a diehard Longhorn fan, but a longtime Austin real estate expert. So give her a shout today at 512-784-0505. That's 512-784-0505. All right, thank you very much to Laura Baker and her team for sponsoring Football Theory. Thank you, Jeff, as always. Great conversation and great takes there, great info. Thanks to Matthew behind the scenes. He's the real MVP. Thank you to all of you guys out there for watching and for listening. And until next time, for Jeff and for Matthew and for accomplished Austin realtor Laura Baker, I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Hook 'em horns.